Hey, thanks for clicking on this video today. I really appreciate it. My name is Matthew Bonig. This video is going to be about the latest version of the CDK just released yesterday, version 2.21.0. If you've been following me on Twitter, then you know that usually when new releases come out, I try to highlight any new features within the product, cover any important bug fixes, anything else like that. But Twitter isn't a great place to really go in depth with anything, so I wanted to start this video series. If you like them, please let me know by leaving a comment or giving me a thumbs up on the video. Hit me up on Twitter as well, at Matt Bonig. Let me know what you think. I'll continue to do them if people like them. This video really is around 2.21, and to try to go a little bit in depth about what some of the changes are, as well as how I read these release notes, how you can read them and learn from them and know what's really changing, because they're coming out about weekly, about every 2 weeks. There's a lot that really changes, and it can be important to understand how to read these release notes and know what's going to be changing in your CDK world. All right, let's get started. So this is the release page up on GitHub for it. It will cover all of the changes that have gone into this release. We're going to go ahead and breeze through this real quick and hit some of the highlights. Now, on any one of these items, there's always going to be these links over here on the right. The first one is going to take you to the issue that was originally opened regarding this particular change. Here we can see someone said, hey, we would like to support launch templates rather than just launch configuration. Pretty reasonable request. Second link is going to be to the commit, which merged the PR into the main trunk. And this is really going to cover all of the important stuff you need to know about what changed within the code base if you're into reading that sort of detail. There's going to be a nice little description up at the top that covers all of the details. Should tell you everything you need to know about how to implement this. And then you can start reading through and see what actual files changed. One of the great places to start is always with the README file for that particular module, because they're going to show you things like examples of how to use these new changes and should get you really rolling pretty quickly. So as we go through this here, we can see things like there is an ECR change around image tags and digests. Great, you can now reference your ECR images by digest, not just by tag. There are some changes to the CFN spec. This really only affects you if you're using L1 constructs in places. Looks like there was a change to the CLI for allowing glob style key matching for context resets. So if you use your context a lot, you sometimes have to reset it because perhaps you read a VPC and that VPC ultimately changed with some of its subnets or other things. You need to reset that context. This gives you a slightly nicer way by using glob style wildcard matching to do any sort of resets on those contexts. This new code build feature is actually pretty neat. There is now this ability to provide in here a build status URL. And when a build is done, all the status important information about that build will get sent to this URL. So really handy for a webhook for automation purposes and things like that. This feature I'm going to probably be using here shortly when it comes to a client of ours who's using Code Pipeline and Code Build for building out their Docker images. Code Pipeline gets the ability to disable stage transactions directly within your IAC. Good, nice little feature to have. Lambda gets function URL. So this is really awesome. If you have been following anything in the Lambda world for the last couple of weeks, function URLs was a feature that was just released that allows you to put a very simple HTTP end listener on front of your Lambda functions without having to worry about API gateway or some sort of other mechanism. Fairly limited in scope as far as what it's really trying to do, but if you've got the purpose for things like webhooks, it's a really great feature. We're going to go more in depth on it here in a moment. Logs, in the CloudWatch logs, we get a query definition L2 construct. Anytime there's a new L2 construct, I always like to kind of dig into this a little bit and see exactly what it is. So this is a great way for using CloudWatch log insights and being able to define those query definitions right now in your code in a nice, simple, easy to use construct. So great feature there. S3 deployment. So this is a very handy construct, very high level L3 type construct for taking code within a repository, within your CDK repository, and shipping it into an S3 bucket, probably because of website hosting or other things like that. Previously, Lambda's had a memory limit of about 512 megs. So if what you were shipping was larger than about 500 megs, then you were running into these problems where this S3 deployment probably wasn't working for you very well. Well, now thanks to the changes in Lambda with a much larger ephemeral storage configuration, now that's being passed on to this construct. So you can specify that. So if you know that you've got a really big package that you're deploying out to S3, well, now you've got this ability to work around that problem that you had previously. And then finally, this is a really nice little quality of life feature. This is for checking for accidental exposures within secrets. So it's very easy to accidentally expose a secret value from Secrets Manager in your CloudFormation code or within your other resources within AWS. There are some nice features within CloudFormation that allow you to reference the value in a secret to be a parameter within your CloudFormation resource, but that can get misused pretty easily. So there's a new feature that's behind this check secret usage feature flag that really tries to prevent you from accidentally using Secrets Manager wrong. This is a great feature. I highly recommend turning this on your packages and seeing if maybe you're already using secrets and exposing those underlying values a little incorrectly and correcting them where you can. Next up is bug fixes. I'm not going to dig into these too much. At this point, you can kind of go through if you've been having problems with particular constructs or modules, then keep an eye open in this section, see if maybe they've addressed it. One of these things that came up recently was in the CLI, where they had made a change and accidentally overwrote error messages that could come up during a deployment with further messages. I actually didn't even notice this when it was happening to me the other day. I had stacks that were going out, they were deploying incorrectly and failing, and I wasn't seeing the messages showing up in the console, but I typically during those failures go immediately into CloudFormation anyway within the UI console. So I didn't even really notice that this was happening, but they got that fixed up and that's really great. And then finally, there's the alpha modules down here towards the bottom. Alpha modules are those things that are still being in development that you have to opt in and specifically include within your CDK code. In this case, they recently released this integ runner a couple of releases ago, so there's some changes that they've been making to that. If you're using that integration runner, go ahead and make sure that you regression test all of your code before upgrading to 2.21. And then finally, API Gateway v2, you can now set some throttling on your stages and IoT events. We get some comparison operators, which is great. And again, just like everything else, you can always go back to seeing the original issue that was opened up and also seeing the code changes to address that issue, which is really cool. So that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the Lambda functions. This is a really cool feature. A lot of people were really excited about it, me included. Makes it very easy when you have to do things like webhooks, which as a DevOps engineer, I'm writing webhooks all the time. There's always these integration points between systems, and webhooks is the most common way to get that done. So let's go take a look. Over here in my code base, I've gone ahead and started up a new CDK project. I've used Progen for doing this. So I've gone ahead and created a new Lambda handler. This one's really simple. All it's going to do is return back a success code on request. So this is my handler. I'm going to go ahead and write up some code to use it. Now, because I'm using Progen will actually go ahead and generate me a simple Lambda function construct to wrap around that handler that I already wrote. And this is pretty convenient because this will take care of a lot of issues around asset bundling and shipping. And if you've ever wrote a CDK construct for third-party usage that uses TypeScript, you know what a pain in the butt it can be to kind of handle some of those things yourself. So this is a really nice feature. I highly recommend you use it if you're going to be building third-party constructs with Lambdas. Go ahead and let Progen actually generate out this function for you. So now that I've got that, all I have to do is say testing function handler equals new function URL. And then to enable the function URL on it, I just call this little helper method add function URL. And it takes a couple of options. First one is going to be CORS. If you've ever dealt with CORS before on any sort of HTTP endpoint, I'm not going to cover it here. Just know that you got those options for specifying those CORS header information. But the one we care about is authentication type. So we've got two authentication options in front of us. We can either use Iam Authentication or no authentication. if you're going to be calling this from an external service because of integration from GitHub, CircleCI, whatever, you're probably going to be doing a none integration and then writing the authentication information into your handler directly. If that doesn't work for you, function URLs aren't your case, you're probably going to want to step back and use API Gateway then at that point. But if you can handle not having authentication on your handler, great. Just put none on here and the thing is wide open to the internet. Buyer beware. You now have a URL that's completely open to the internet that anybody can call anytime they want to. But that's not much fun. Let's go ahead and talk about the Iam Authentication option. So if we do this, we now need to be able to grant some sort of principal within our account access to calling this function. So I'm going to create a new role, and this role is just going to be testing role. I'm going to make sure I can assume it by a new account principal. And I'm going to just say anybody in my current account, the account that I'm deploying to in this case. So we'll call this an assumable role. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and grant that permission. Now the function URL just has a grant invoke on it. So we'll go ahead and do an assumable role, clean up our code, and that's going to be it. So let's go ahead and deploy this out. All right, so we're all deployed out now. I've gone ahead and assumed some credentials over into using this new testing role that I created. And I've gone ahead and gone into the UI console and grabbed out the functional URL. Unfortunately, this function URL isn't available right now in the CDK code. I can't create it as a CFN output, but I just went ahead into the console and grabbed that back out. So now that we've got that, we're going to go ahead and hop over to Postman. Now I'm using Postman in this case because it allows for easy authentication. It's got a built-in SIG v4 authentication scheme. So just going to go ahead and hit send here, and I get back my success message, which is great. Now, one thing that's very interesting about this that I want to show you real quick, if we go back over to the code, and I take a look at my function handler here. So I'm returning back, in this case, a very typical API gateway type response, a status code and a body as the required fields on it. But this new function URL code is sort of interesting. It'll actually handle both. I can either return back this object, or I can just return back success. Let's say updated success just to prove I'm doing it. And we'll go ahead and redeploy through a hot swap. All right, now that that's all deployed out, let's go back and take a look at Postman. And let's see what happens this time. So now keep in mind, I'm not returning back that standard API gateway type response. Now I'm just returning back a standard string. And it still works, which is really cool. They built that flexibility into it. I think that's really nice. Now, one thing I'd recommend is if you think that you're going to go down this route of exposing this as a functional URL and you want to sometime later maybe put API gateway in front of it, might be worth just go ahead and returning back that proper API gateway response from day one and save yourself a little bit of trouble. Now, one thing that's also interesting is that this will respond back to gets, posts, puts, any type of response that you want to hand to it. And the body, the event that's handed to the Lambda function, is a pretty standard API gateway body. So you can basically treat this like an API gateway Lambda proxy integration type of handler. Small little differences between them, but I'll let you find those on your own. Hope that was useful. Hope there was something good out of that. If not, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter, again, @MattBonig. Let me know what you think. If you think there are some improvements I can make, I'd love to hear them. You can also reach out onto me at the cdk.dev Slack channel. Please join us over there for all things CDK related. Thank you and have a great day.